All right, thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Albert Sanchez is my guest. He's a researcher. He is involved in presenting a modality by which someone with cancer can manage their cancer better and also cancer prevention. Al, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Charles. Appreciate that.
Al, give us a little background in terms of what it is how it is you arrived at the modality that you represent and where it is now.
Well, it's actually a very personal journey, one that my father started well over 30 years ago when my mother passed away of cancer. So this is early 70s, and then he rolls into the 80s where um, AIDS really became the big thing. Well, they didn't have an option for the AIDS patients, so they were able to try all these quote unquote alternative and different type of treatments because they had nothing for them that were targeting their immune systems, as we all know how the AIDS virus works. So roll that another decade forward, and now cancer patients try and do that. Roll that another decade forward, and my older sister passes away of cancer. So that now brings me into the fold, working with my father to work with these doctors and clinicians and really looking at protocols for cancer therapies and what can be done about these things. So I bring my engineering and research background and say, well, let's just start with the simplest and then work to the more complex, because that's how typically you really fix things. And in cancer therapy, that really helps the patients because, as we already know, the three options conventionally they're going to give you is chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery. Well, those are all three drastic options, and they're very impactful, as we know. And death can be the result of the treatment, not even of the disease. So, how do you manage that? And that's kind of the short story of how I sit before you.
Now, Al, before we go into how you manage it, could you talk a little bit? And I know this is a very broad question, and it's not one that I don't think anyone has an answer to. But
Right?
exactly what is cancer?
Well, that's a wonderful, simple, and very powerful question. And what I mean by that is that cancer is us. It's our own cells. It's a form of what our cells do as a normal byproduct of life every day. When we were conceived, technically, we were a single-celled cancer growing inside of our mother that doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled until some point in time the tissue became what we call differentiated, or hey, I'm going to go become a liver, I'm going to go become skin, blood, I'm going to become a specialized cell versus a cancer cell. So if you get diagnosed with, let's say, breast cancer or prostate cancer, those are abnormal cells of just that tissue. So they're our own cells in
So
a
then
simple way.
the cancer cells exist in us since birth. They sometimes they generally do not manifest themselves because perhaps the body's natural immunity prevents that from happening, takes the cells out, and maybe when we can no longer do that, that's when cancer starts to manifest and become a problem and starts to take over.
That's correct. As a doctor in a gurney had put it some years ago, it's not that cancer cells grow too fast; they don't die fast enough.
So then the idea and the theory here then would be to improve the immune system to the point where you can naturally or with the help of externals destroy your own cancer cells.
Correct. It's finding that recipe that's going to turn your own body system back on to keep everything in check, back to that balance, or what we like to call it homeostasis.
Although, I mean, again, I'm not in any way a medical doctor, but
Mhm.
it does seem to me that the use at times of surgery, like the removal of a tumor, is good because you remove that body of cancer cells, and then you also, it's not to in any way negate the fact that also you need to, if anything, you need more so to increase the natural immunities to make sure that it doesn't come back.
That's correct. So they call that debulking the tumor, and that's important. If a tumor can be debulked and removed, by all means, get that out, because what that does is then the burden on the body to have to deal with that has been removed,
Right. No, I
so it
mean,
can
I know.
start.
I mean, in my own example, many years ago, I had a small cancerous tumor removed, and it's never come back.
There you go.
And I've also done things that have improved my immune system.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe it's quack. Maybe I know that I feel better, but I take stuff every day, and naturally
Exactly.
I take like turmeric and beet and garlic and all these other things that I think that at worst they're harmless. It's not going to do.
Correct.
It's not going to hurt me any. But at best, I think that it helps improve my blood, and it helps improve a lot of a lot of things in my system. And I've noticed that since I've started doing this all maybe a couple of years ago, my health has improved markedly. So there's no downside to these things. I mean, you just, if you're taking a natural substance. Now, what is it that you, Al Sanchez, are suggesting specifically as a means to kill the cancer?
Well, as with any disease, and I'm sure you've had the flu in your life, right?
Right.
And possibly when you were recovering from your cancer, going through that, you were feeling pretty fatigued and down and out, right?
Yeah.
So in both situations, whether it was flu or whether it was cancer, you had fatigue. And that fatigue is targeted in a little part of our cells that's called the mitochondria. Mm-hmm. So what I call it is mitochondrial or metabolic medicine. And what that means is that no matter what situation you are, cancer patients being the worst, because they're so metabolically challenged, that needs to be a very important part of any protocol, is targeting the mitochondria and energy and that process. And when you do that and you integrate that with your therapies and your protocols, these patients do astoundingly better.
So in short layman's terms, in other words, what you're saying is that if you can help someone overcome fatigue and regain their strength, then they're going to rally that strength physically, not to mention emotionally and mentally, in the direction. Because when someone has a cancer, I mean that's not a good thing for your self-esteem. You don't right? I mean, it's not happy news. And I've noticed that that people that I've known over the years who have had cancers and who have recovered, there's an enormous amount of will and energy on their part. They're going to get through it. They're going to do it. I know this woman recently who was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she's fine now. But I could tell from meeting her while she was undergoing therapy, and she had the chemotherapy. It was horrible, but the point is, I could tell that she was going to make it because she had such a strong will and such a strong constitution, and she absolutely, totally was believing that she would make it. There was not even a hint of possibility otherwise that she got through it and did. So, there is this idea of galvanizing your energy, keeping yourself positive, which is not always easy, and continuing to function as to the height of your ability in a positive sense.
Totally. No, that's what we call the mental and the spiritual aspect of healing in any situation, because like you mentioned, you tell somebody the C word and say cancer, and all of a sudden, you go into shock. Oh my God! All the thoughts of the pictures that we've seen. We know the statistics. The likelihood the deck is stacked against you.
Yeah.
Oh my! So you have to process all that. That's draining. Like you said, this isn't the flu where the worst thing you're going to worry about is being out of work for a week. No, this is cancer therapy. This is I'm going to lose my hair. I'm going to drop 50 pounds. I'm not going to be around people. I got to wear masks, and I got to be quarantined, and I got to be taking these poison. Oh, that's brutal.
Right.
Brutal.
Right.
So you are absolutely correct that's such a key component. I mean, if we want to put a number on it, let's just say it's 10% from an emotional perspective, 10% from a spiritual perspective, 10% from family and loving support perspective. Well, gee, if the battle is 100%, you just got 30% of it right there. So you only have to take care of 70% with the treatments and the support and the food and everything else. Well, that's a big swing.
So beyond that, and we agree that obviously is very key in healing. What is it that your clinic offers and why?
Well, so what I work with is the doctors developing the protocols that we call integrative medicine. where you integrate the fact of what we call conventional or possibly chemo in a cancer case. This would be chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery. So if you do have to have surgery, prepare for it, right? Be
Right.
sure you're strong, be sure you're healthy, be sure you're going into it, be sure you have your plan in place, because after surgery, you're going to need help. What are you going to be eating? Well, that's going to be who's going to take care of you. Those are important things that we want to get off your plate. Okay, and then as soon as possible, this is where you start back on the nutritional regime and the diet, and how you're going to get into this, and how you're going to mitigate the circumstances. Because for any of us who've gone through any surgery, even a minor surgery, just coming out of the anesthesia is brutal. Let alone if you had something really cut out and it was a very extensive, let's say it was a glioblastoma or brain cancer.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough surgery to recover from.
Now,
So,
what specifically do you recommend diet-wise? What are the best foods, both in terms of recovery, but also in terms of prevention?
right. Well, clearly they call it the rainbow diet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of color in your diet. And I like to refer to it as farm to table, right? The closer you can get to the farm and the closer you can bring that to your table, the healthier it is. Those are the general rules. The more processing, manufacturing, transportation, the more handling that food has to go through, the more adulterated it might become, right?
Right.
So you're trying to stick with the freshest stuff. There's multiple, we could talk for hours, days on the Mediterranean diet, the ketogenic diet, the macrobiotic diet, the paleo diet, all. But if you look at them, look at the commonality between them. I like common sense and keeping things simple. If you make your diet so difficult that it becomes stressful in your life, it's not going to be healthy. Does that make sense?
Of course.
So,
And also, the American diet has increasingly become processed, and
mhm,
preservatives are put into the food, so it sits on the shelf longer. And these things, it's obvious and it's sensible that it's going to take a toll on you, because these are chemicals, and because you don't want, by preserving something, it's losing its freshness. Like if you go to Italy, for example, and in many other countries, they have very high standards when it
yep,
comes to food. If you go to like a rest side restaurant in Italy, they're going to be picking the tomatoes in the backyard and
that's
putting it
correct.
on your salad. They're going to be slaughtering a goat. It's
That's
like
correct.
everything is like they have very high standards of food, and that's why they don't even allow American imports in many cases. And this also includes Asian Rim countries like Korea
Right.
or Japan and Taiwan. They don't let American imports in because they have very good standards when it comes to the freshness of their food.
How profound is that?
Yeah,
Right? Smaller countries understand and know how important it is, and they actually ban our products from being imported into their country because they contain chemicals that they don't want in their population.
exactly.
Power.
So there's
They
nothing wrong with
speak
looking
volumes.
at the labels and limiting to a certain extent complex foods that fast foods, processed foods. There's nothing wrong with it. We all like McDonald's once in a while, but
Sure.
you don't want to make these things a habit.
That's correct. So, and I call that the 80-20 rule. It's difficult, especially with my schedule of when I'm traveling, doing conferences and speaking and training and stuff. I'm on the road a lot. And in doing so, I have to either plan my meals or make it a point to, which is nice in today's day and age, because you can ask the restaurant, hey, do you do this, 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 and this? And they have, some of them are really nice about telling you that. And so, but you really have to think about it, because again, like you said, you know, it's easy to drive by 20 McDonald's in just one trip across the city, right?
The drive-up
so
window, exactly.
so you live by that 80-20 rule, where when you're at home, if all you have what's in your house is healthy, organic, natural, non-processed, non-chemically, non-packaged foods, then guess what? It's easy to control. You're going to go out, you're going to go to a Super Bowl party, you're going to go to a birthday party. Okay, have 2 bites of the cake. That's not going to be a big deal, but don't eat the whole piece of cake. Just have 2 bites and say thank you.
Exactly, and also, I mean, the downside is that Whole Foods is so expensive. I mean, it's
Right. Well,
you have to splurge and get the great produce, but and it is organic, and they have they have very good standards. But unfortunately, it's more expensive than going to a cheap place.
well, and it's more expensive from what we're used to, right? So I like to reverse the question around and say we shouldn't be asking why or even thinking about Whole Foods being so expensive. We should be asking why the processed and cheaper foods are so inexpensive,
Right.
right?
No, and not to
Right?
mention the fact that if you end up getting cancer or heart disease, that's going to be expensive. Not to
That's
mention it
correct.
could ruin your life. So I
Yeah,
mean, it's an investment.
that's
If you
correct.
take a look and you consider food as something that's going to make you stronger, going to make you
Hmm.
healthy, if you ask yourself that whenever you
Right?
get food, if you're conscious about it, is this
Correct.
food going to make me feel better or worse? Doesn't mean you don't
Right.
always have the fast food, but generally, as mature people, we need to regulate those things. Now,
Right.
Al, is your clinic offering some kind of a particular treatment for someone who is dealing with cancer? And if so,
So I
what
don't
is
have
it?
my own clinic. I work with the doctors' clinics around
Yes.
the country and around the world outside the U.S. in developing these protocols so that because they already have the established history, they have the staff, they have everybody. And what I'm trying to do is coalesce this information and find out which ones are really working and which ones aren't. Because at a certain level, they've been doing this now for a good 30 to 40 years. So what is their success rate? What are they doing and why? And there's very few clinics out there that are actually doing tracking the cases, looking at their protocols, trying something for a certain amount of time, and then adjusting and tweaking. Because when you say cancer, you can say, okay, there's some prostate cancer out there that's pretty benign, some breast cancer as well. There's also some that's very aggressive. You're talking pancreatic, you're talking glioblastoma. Those are some real serious ones. So, and not every doctor sees the same patient, let alone the same case. So, trying to get this information and find out what they're doing, when they're doing it, and why they're doing it to see what success they're getting, that's a big undertaking that we've been working with for some years now.
And I suppose that you could say that it has to be tailored to the individual, their condition, their situation.
Right.
I'd like to mention that to anybody watching the program who might be dealing with this, that cancer is not the death sentence that it once was. It
No, not at
is
all. Not even close. And primarily, the big change that's happened is that we're diagnosing, we're looking for it, right? We didn't used to, in this country, you didn't even bother looking for cancer unless you were above 50, right? Now, teenagers are getting screened for cancer immediately.
now when
Young
you
people
say
are
getting
taught,
screened. I understand there's this new modality by which you can predict cancer years away through a simple screening.
well, it helps to
And imaging.
identify the high risk and the low risk, and that's all. Like, for example, my family, my sister, my mother, and actually my grandmother, all passed away of colon cancer. So therefore, I go get a colonoscopy every 2 to 3 years, depending on what the previous one said. I've had one since I was 25, and I'll be 50 this year. So, you know, that's a lot of
Yeah,
screenings.
because you knew
However,
this in advance. Like the actress Angelina Jolie, she had both breasts removed because breast cancer. She was told by doctors she had at least a 50% chance of getting breast cancer based upon
right.
the genetics and the family history, and so this is how she decided to deal with that.
Well, that's a little bit aggressive in my opinion, but
Right, but it's a
at
personal
least
choice. She doesn't want to worry
right.
about it. I remember when Nancy Reagan had breast cancer, she had everything completely removed. She didn't want to have
Right.
any treatments, any restoratives. That's how she wanted to deal with it. It's a
Right.
personal question. And she lived for another 30 years, so it's not like it was the wrong thing to do at all.
Well, and this is what's going to be interesting, Charles, is that um, and there's some cases out there, and they're few and far between, but they're going to tell us a lot of information where women have done that, and yet, so it's a really interesting riddle. They get rid of their breasts, and yet down the road they get breast cancer.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So
tragic.
Yeah, because it's telling you that those cells have been around long before. So it's called oncogenesis, and you have initiation, progression, metastasis. It's kind of the process with cancer cells. But that cancer initiation, like we talked about earlier, that could have happened 20 years ago. And that cell has been hanging out there, just being left alone because it's one of our own cells. And not until the environment, the microenvironment as we call it, and the epigenetics, what that means is how your environmental factors are going to influence that cell, all of a sudden respond. And just like the weeds in a garden, it becomes the right terrain and then the cancer can explode.
Oh
So
boy.
this diet, lifestyle, played the most important role in prevention, as well as, like you said, the supplementation, the curcumin, the lipoic acid complexes, glutathione, vitamin C. This is what our body uses. This is what our body's made out. This is how our immune system functions. So how do you know either today, 10 years from now, or 10 years ago, that if you didn't have those in your system at the time to keep your immune system on game, that it let some rogue cancer cell hang out? You don't.
Now,
Well,
do you recommend, Al, because you mentioned a couple of supplements,
mhm.
ones that I happen to be taking? Do you
Well,
recommend any particular discipline regarding supplements? And if so, what is it?
so I in my regimen of supplements, like my personal one, I take vitamin D, 5,000 units twice a day. I take CoQ10, 100 milligrams twice a day. I take a multivitamin twice a day. I take fish oils twice a day. I take the poly MVA twice a day. I take a liver support twice a day. So pretty much I take these all at the same time. Um, and I take a curcumin, and that's kind of my basics that I take on a regular basis.
All right, excellent. No, that's
Yeah,
I mean, that's a great discipline. I have my own thing, and it's includes some of that. Some of it
yeah.
is different. Everyone develops,
You
you
got
know.
green juices. You got some green packs that have multivitamins in it. If
Yeah,
that's what you like, go for it. If it's
green
got
tea.
CoQ10 in
Green
it,
tea
go
is
for
good.
it.
Even though I don't like green tea, I've gotten used to
Right,
the I've gotten used to the matcha green tea, which I think
right.
is pretty good. So when I go to Starbucks now, I get the matcha green tea with
There you
almond
go.
milk as opposed to regular. I don't want dairy. And
Perfect.
yeah, so I
See,
mean, we all, these are little habits that we can develop
that's
that
correct.
you replace little things here and there, you tweak it, and you get used to it, and it just becomes, as soon you forget about it, it becomes just part of your routine.
It is. I don't look at it as like I'm having to do this. I
Right.
look forward to doing it, right? This is part of what I do.
Yeah.
And does it, and I have to budget for it every month. So guess
Right.
what? I don't go to the movies anymore because my health is far more important than movies, and I'll catch it on Netflix when it comes out,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Now you can order through cable. You can get all this stuff.
Yeah, so it's a choice,
Yeah.
and it's a personal choice depending on what your lifestyle and what it is. But your health is your wealth, as I put it. There is nothing more important than your body and what you're doing to it. So, yeah, you may have this. If you like going, you mentioned Starbucks, great. You could easily drop, $5 to $10 at a Starbucks every day, let alone $50 a week. That pays for your supplement. So,
True.
does it, you have to start making coffee at home so that you can still have your coffee and not, okay, but why would you not do that? Is your health, if anybody's ever seen somebody go through a cancer treatment, or even what's coming up really strong nowadays is Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, all these degenerative diseases. It's no coincidence that degenerative diseases in the end of the 20th century and into the 21st century have dominated the scene. If you get USA Today, I was just reading an article this morning, I didn't get a chance to finish it. Alzheimer's disease has climbed in 10 years. I think it jumped almost 20%. Don't quote me on that exactly. I'd have to go to my.
It's almost like an epidemic.
That's my point. Where is this coming from? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist
Yeah.
to say diet, lifestyle, and
The environment.
it, and the environment. So it's simple. It's right there in front of us. I know we don't want to look at it. I know we don't want to change what we're doing or having the cars that we have and the access that we have to everything, but we're paying a price for it on the back end of it, and I hope we learn from it sooner rather than later.
All right, Al. So let my viewers and listeners know how they can reach you, how they can read articles about you, and about what you recommend.
Oh, all right. So the best way to reach me would be through email, I would guess. So you can reach me at al@polymva.com. That's POLY, M as in Mary, V as in Victor, A as in Apple.com. There's information on the website there about health and the various supplements that we talked about. So you can visit polymva.com. So shoot me an email. The office number is right there on the website, but you can give it a call at 619-447-6500. So again, that's 619-447-6500. And I can put you in touch with the various doctors and research and information and kind of the whole process of what we do and why we do it and the doctors that we work with. It's exciting. It really is, because it helps to know that, what my mother and my sister and what I've gone through in my life, that I can hopefully share that with others. And we've already seen the difference. That's the great thing about it. Talking with other families and other individuals, and they call themselves survivors. I like to call them thrivers. But they beat the odds, like you mentioned earlier, from glioblastoma to pancreatic cancer. And it's a tough process. It's not easy. It's a lifestyle change, like you mentioned earlier, but it can be done. So the most important message that I ever want to convey is that, one, you're not alone. And two, there are more options out there that you can think of. And when you look at the commonality between them, they're pretty basic. And they come down to what I like to call common sense medicine and targeting those little things we call mitochondria.
Well, Al, I always feel good about doing a show like this because I might save a life. Somebody watching it could end up saying, hey, that describes me, and they might contact you and get information, and
Right.
they can improve their life. I usually do, more hardcore political things, but this one, once in a while, I do like to delve into something like this. So,
Well, if you ever want to get into the political side of cancer, we can talk about that too, because that's a whole different animal in itself. But
we should.
no,
We should
yeah.
another time. But yes.
It's a big beast. It's a big animal that, until we can change the minds of those in Washington and those in power to understand that, just like back in the day when they thought chiropractors were quacks and acupuncturists were quacks.
Oh, yeah.
Well, guess, now they're not. Well,
oh, no, not at all. You know what changed that? I think when Nixon was preparing to go to China, he had a delegation of people who went there to meet in advance. And there was the ping pong diplomacy. And one of the guys, while in China, had a heart attack, and he was treated with acupuncture, and he recovered amazingly well. He came back to the United States, and he said, we got to get this here. This is amazing. And thus, acupuncture was introduced. So, a little information can go a long way.
It really does. I really, really appreciate you putting it out there. And if we ever want to talk on that side of it, to hopefully influence and change the minds and set some seeds for those in decision-making places in politics to hopefully open their thoughts and minds to it even more, I'm happy to do so.
Excellent. All right, Al Sanchez, thanks so much for joining me.
All right, be well. Take care.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
All right, Al, and I'll send you off.